Welcome to the Natural Health Podcast, where we bring awareness of sustainable health in the business hustle space. The Natural Health Podcast is perfect for the high-performing, business-minded individuals who want to work with their biochemistry to achieve success and optimal health. It's Friday, which means it's time for friend-sharing facts about health, business, and overall success. In today's episode, we talk to Jodie Ellenor. Jodie is an anxiety expert extraordinaire. She's on a mission to help women heal anxiety holistically so they can spend more time enjoying life and less time fearing it. She helps women to help you eliminate racing thoughts, panic attacks, concentration challenges, and sleepless nights. Not only does she explore the mindset factors that lead to anxiety, but also uses functional lab testing. She combines her training as a therapist, functional diagnostic nutritionist practitioner, and a yoga instructor to truly offer a mind-body approach to healing. Jodie became passionate about functional medicine through her own health journey. She spent 13 years seeking answers to her gut issues and anxiety after living in Africa. When she isn't talking about anxiety, you'll find Jodie outdoors. She has a love affair with nature and is an avid photographer. She also fell in love with surfing during a trip to Costa Rica, through she usually ends up under the waves more often than riding them. A few interesting facts about Jodie is that she absolutely loves photography. She's actually traveled over 31 countries by the age of 31. And her favorite way to unwind is backcountry camping, where she literally unplugs. Welcome to the Natural Health Podcast, Jodie.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So 31 countries by the age of 31. I mean, we're not going to go on naming all 31, but what have been your top two or so?
Oh, that's such a hard question. And people have asked me this a few times, and I feel like I change my answers every time someone asks me the question. Tanzania, for sure. I was there for a year and a half. So I got to know the culture, the language, the people, and I fell in love with the landscape. So that would be up there. And I really liked Turkey as well. It was kind of my first more adventurous traveling, and it has a lot to offer in terms of culture and adventure and nice beaches and food. So it sort of has everything for every type of traveler.
Yeah, wow. Turkey was definitely on my list as a next country because just the culture, the food, oh my gosh, it looks absolutely amazing. And where I am from, back ages ago, Turkey actually invaded the country. So it was in charge of Bosnia, Herzegovina, Croatia, all that. So it has a Turkish influence. So some of the words that we use, like mashallah, we drink tea, we drink the Turkish coffee, has all of that influence. And near my grandma, where she lives, there's also a castle there, a Turkish castle. So yeah, so it'd be really interesting to go see Turkey. So it's interesting that you brought that one up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's one of my top favorites for sure.
And you absolutely love their food, hey?
Yeah.
So amazing.
A lot of kebabs.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, beautiful. So look, here in the Natural Health Podcast, before we get about today, anxiety, but we always like to find out a little bit more about you. So I want to know, what have been the key turning points to your journey where you are today? Because in the biography, I mentioned a few interesting things about your life. But if you can just tell us a few key turning points that led you to where you are now, Jodie.
Yeah, I think the big one for me was when I discovered functional medicine. I mean, before I discovered functional medicine, I'd seen about 5 different naturopaths. I tried a bunch of different types of, diets. I've tried a lot of different things to figure things out. And I kind of had the sense of, I'm missing something, but I'm not really sure what I'm missing. And then I discovered the world of functional medicine. And I remember actually my first meeting where the guy, and we're still actually quite good friends now, he showed me all these lab tests and all the information I could find about myself. And I was like, this exists? Like, it blew my mind that I could find out all of this information. And it was so hidden for me to access it, that for me was when it really sort of opened the door into a new way of seeing what healing was. And it gave me hope that I could actually, find answers to things that I'd been spinning my wheels on for a long time. So that was a really big turning point. The second big one was actually more recently when I discovered that your nervous system can actually wire based on birth traumas. And so, when we think of, trauma and we think of, our lifespan, we think about what we remember. So we're like, well, this happened when I was 4 and, I fell down the stairs when I was 5 and broke my leg. Like, we don't really think about ever including like, what was your environment like in utero, or, how were you born? What's your birth story? And how has that impacted your attachments with other people? How has that impacted your nervous system in developing? And so when I uncovered that, in conjunction with intergenerational trauma, it was another one of those like, whoa moments for me where I was like, there's this whole other pocket again of understanding how I'm wired, how my clients are wired, that I never would have thought about before.
Yeah. And no one really goes, hey, what's your birth story? No one really, that question is not really asked, is it?
No, it's not asked actually. And like for me, I have about 8 different birth traumas. So that's had a pretty big impact. One of which, I vomited my mom's breast milk. I had failure to thrive. And that would have automatically impacted how my nervous system developed, right? Through no fault of her own. It's not my mom's fault, but yet it was something that happened and my body experienced, which is a big piece of the puzzle for some people.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We have to get you back to come on here and talk about just that one topic.
I know.
And
good topic.
Yeah, we have to dig deep into that. But let's go back to your gut issues. So what were you kind of experiencing? So if the audience may experience something similar, and I mean, you were chasing for answers for a very long time.
I was years. I did like 4 different Candida diets because the naturopaths were convinced, that's what your issue is. And I was like, well, I'm pretty sure that Candida diet number 1 would have solved that, but I'll do it again for you just to, make sure. And, for me, it was a combination of bloating. It was a combination of gas, stomach aches, poorly digested food in my stool. So I had, alternating constipation, diarrhea. I sort of had the whole gamut of symptoms actually. And, uncovering what root causes were, I also had a lot of different root causes, which sort of makes sense, right? Like I didn't have just like one classic symptom. I had, a bunch of them, and it reflected so many different layers of issues going on with my gut.
Yeah. Wow. And I mean, it would have been frustrating, and I can, the audience would find it frustrating too if they're going through something similar to you. And then you said you found functional medicine. What is that? What tests, like, what did you do?
Yeah. So functional medicine, it's really about looking at the person as a whole. So, that's actually how I got on the birth trauma track, because we don't want to just look at the symptom and squash the symptom. So conventional medicine is like, oh, you have anxiety. How do we get rid of it as fast as possible? And here's, X pill or Y therapy, and we're just going to get rid of it. Whereas, functional medicine is why. Why do you have that symptom? What message is the body telling you? Where is it coming from? And so a portion of it before we even get to testing is about, how do we change your lifestyle? Are you sleeping enough? Do you have a good social life? Are you engaging in things that bring you joy? Do you like your job? Like all of those things are important questions to ask. And then there's the question, and what I sort of fell in love with was, let's run some lab tests and see what we can actually find that might not be disease state that doctors are going to pick up, but it's going to be enough to create these symptoms in you. So like the big ones that I run a lot, I run a hair tissue mineral analysis. So that's a hair test, and it will tell me what's been going on with your minerals at a cellular level in the past about 3 months. So I get this really nice snapshot of what's happening at the cells. So even if your blood work comes back normal, I can see this is what you're trending towards. So we can see where you're going to head in like a couple months to a couple years to maybe a decade from now. I pick that up. So that's when I like to run. I like to run a hormone test where we're looking, not just at the hormones, but how are the hormones breaking down? Are your adrenals producing enough stress hormone cortisol, or are they producing too much? What's going on with your melatonin? Is that why you can't sleep at night? What are your neurotransmitters like? So we're getting this like nice picture of what's going on instead of just like, oh, your estrogen exists, like you're good. And then the third one would be the gut test, the GI map. And then I run one that looks for mold colonization as well. And this is looking at different infections. So, do you have worms inside of you, which I did? Do you have parasites? Are you reacting to gluten? What's the gut health like? Do you have anything living in you that shouldn't be there? So this can give us lots of things to work on, lots of whys, right? And then sometimes the deeper question is like, well, why do you have a gut infection? Oh, because your diet's not great. Or you're, running around like a chicken with your head cut off, working 60 hours a week. Like, of course, you're going to have all these issues, but now we can fix them when we fix other things. So that's my long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that, because there's so many individuals out there who have the bloating, have the diarrhea, constipation on and off, who maybe even can't sleep or anything along those lines. And they're like, oh, something's wrong with me. I'm not, right. But then the thing that you said is something may be living inside of you that shouldn't, which is so interesting. And people think, what? Something inside of me that shouldn't? I mean, the question I always ask individuals is, how often do you actually look at your poo?
Yeah, that's such a good question.
They don't. No one wants to. We haven't normalized it. And I always say my mission is to normalize you looking at your poo every day.
Yeah.
That's what you find out, those things that you said.
To do that, right? Because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to know that something's living inside of me. And so that's where that anxiety comes in of like, I'd rather not know. But if it's already in you, don't you want to get it out? Like, yeah. So you're just finding out what already exists.
Yeah, exactly. So now that you've been through all of this and, you've come to study it and help others, what does success and optimal health look like for you now?
I mean, that's a really great question. For me, I'm still on a journey. I'm still kind of diving layers deep into it. But if I were to talk about, what optimal health looks like, I think as society, we don't understand what that means. A lot of people are like, and I talk to them, they're like, oh, I'm healthy. Like I eat vegetables. And that's it. Or like, yeah, I'm good. Like I don't have cancer or like any major disease. And so for them, health is like sort of eating healthy and not having any diagnosable disease. But for me, health is like waking up and feeling great, feeling good in your body, having a mind that feels calm and, clear and crisp when you need it. So it's sort of going beyond like, oh, I don't have a disease to like, I feel fantastic. That's what optimal health is. Yeah. And I think we miss that.
Yeah, you're so right. You're absolutely right. People going around, I'm healthy, I don't have cancer. And it's kind of, I ask people to question the definition of optimal health, exactly like you did just now too. Question, what does, let's say, what does optimal Jodie look like for the next 5 years? What does, optimal Mihaela look like for the next 5 years? And then when you start thinking about it and you're putting it to yourself, you're like, oh, maybe it looks like this and this and this, Yes, maybe one of them may be not having cancer, but what's the other stuff?
Yeah. I mean, very rarely do we think like, oh, I just don't want to have disease. Like when we think about our goals, oftentimes it's like, oh, I want to feel happy or I want to feel comfortable or I want to achieve things. And those are so important. But sometimes if we've been sick for a long time, it can be hard to even imagine something that's good or imagine that we deserve something. That's the other big piece, right? Like I can imagine it, but I'm not worthy of that. So there's often a mindset piece underneath it as well.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, we could go on hours about this. I love it. But let's talk about today's topic, which I'm so excited about, how anxiety is destroying your business success. To start off, can you explain to us what is anxiety?
I feel like that's a bit of a loaded question, because you can get really philosophical on it, or you could get very technical on it, right? When we look at the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is what a lot of psychologists, psychiatrists, and social workers will use to categorize, like anxiety has many different forms. There's social anxiety, or there's just generalized anxiety, or there's phobias about different things. But really in that form, what it is when you have symptoms that are so severe that they're impacting your life. So, anxiety is actually a protective mechanism. It's a natural emotion. And so we don't actually want to fully eliminate anxiety, right? It's like saying, I want to eliminate anger. You're human. So you're probably going to want to experience that. So the role of anxiety is to protect us. If we think about it, when we're anxious, we avoid. And sometimes that can be good things. Like I might want to avoid that poisonous snake. So maybe I want to feel anxiety and fear on that snake, right? But what's happened today is that anxiety has just become, for so many, I work mostly with women, but men as well, it's just become so disproportionate that it's preventing people from living, right? So it's a fear and a worry that's kind of gone out of control. So, in terms of symptoms, I see a variety of different symptoms. For some people, it's, I can't sleep at night. I'm waking up with heart palpitations, or I'm waking up in the morning in full blown panic. My thoughts are racing. So I'm obsessing about the same illogical worry over and over and over and over and over again. And I can't stop thinking about it. Or my thoughts are racing, so fast that I can't even keep track of what's going on and be in my body, to, I have heart palpitations and tremors and I get dizzy, to like, I have these body sensations and I think I'm going to die every time. Like there's such a wide range of how we all experience anxiety when it becomes sort of dysfunctional.
I love that you said in there that you don't want to remove anxiety totally, and that it is a natural response, because individuals who are anxious, they, you go into your own head and you go, this is only something that I suffer with. No one else feels this. No one else understands. This anxiety is overpowering me. It should go away completely. But you actually said that, no, it shouldn't go away completely. It's there to protect us. But individuals there who are having a panic attack aren't thinking it's here to protect me, are they?
No, they're panicking about the panic attack and not knowing what's going on. And, a lot of the women end up going to the hospital convinced they're going to die of heart attack, run, the full gamut of tests. And then the doctors tell them, it's quote unquote, just anxiety. And so that starts this whole process of, ignoring symptoms and feeling shame and guilt for how the body's expressing things that, is a natural signal to us that something's off. And instead, we've now labeled this message as like something that's wrong with us.
Yeah, 100%. And the world is moving so forward. I mean, business individuals, and like you said, you mainly work with women. So let's take, for example, a businesswoman, right? She's running the household, let's say, and also in addition to that, she's running a business, if not multiple businesses. And anxiety is her best friend, isn't it? Because to one extent, she may not realize it, but it actually may push her to a little bit of success. But on the other side, it might push her away from success.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, everyone most people, I think, have experienced the whole, leaving things to the last minute. And then you're just massively productive because there's that anxiety and adrenaline to get things going, right? So for some people, that's what kind of pushes them to success. But then you can get the other extreme where, you're trying to focus on something and you're like, oh my gosh, I have 8 million tasks to do. And your 8 million windows are open and you're jumping from task to task and you're not able to be present in any task. And at the end of the day, you're like, I don't even know what I did today because it felt crazy. Like that's sort of the other extreme of anxiety not being useful in your business.
Yeah. So has anxiety always been around, or is it a new thing?
No, I mean, when we look back at caveman days, the classic, fight or flight. So lion or bear comes around and our bodies are primed to run from that bear, right? Our bodies are primed to have a reaction from it. And it's a, your brain is going to start thinking faster, but then there's lots of physical things that are going on. One of which, just to circle back to digestion, is we're moving blood flow away from digestion, because you're not going to be like, oh, let me just digest this meal while I run from a bear. And so everything we're doing when we're anxious is kind of supposed to be temporary to get us away from that lion or bear. And so, we have, in modern day society, obviously there's no bears anywhere, but we have all of these other stresses that are triggering that same sort of physiological response. And a lot of people think, that's just me being busy. Like, I have too much going on. I'm fighting with my partner. Like, the world's gone mad. And so there's all these external stresses, which absolutely cause anxiety, but not a lot of people think about the internal ones. So most of the women I come across are like, oh, my life is chaotic and I still have anxiety because I just can't calm down. And they don't think about what's going on underneath it.
Yeah, it's that wired and tight and wired feeling, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And that can be the most frustrating, because your body's actually exhausted, but your nervous system is so revved up. It's like there's that bear sitting there outside your room that you just can't settle. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing, is that, I was just talking to somebody today and she's like, I want to be able to sit down and watch TV and relax, but I just find 8 million things to do. And that's not a function of her being too busy. It's actually a function of her nervous system stuck in that fight or flight. And so her body doesn't remember how to be calm anymore.
Yeah, that's such a good point that you mentioned that example, because it's not that you want to do it. You come home and you're like, oh, and you're just like a little tornado in your home. You're probably creating more mess than cleaning up, because like you said, that's how your nervous system is.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're literally just reflecting the upregulation of your nervous system versus, and so calming that down for some people can be difficult, right? Sometimes it's as easy as, I'm going to take an Epsom salt bath and I'm going to come out and be zen. And other times it's not that easy.
Yeah. Because maybe you might be sitting in that bath being like, I'm wasting my time in this bath. I'm getting cold. I'm going to get sick. I just need to do this and this and this. Why am I in this bath? And then you get even more anxious about it.
And the bath might not be coming at what's upregulating your nervous system in the first place, right? So it's like trying to calm you down by giving you lots of magnesium, which is a calming mineral. But if your issue is like, I don't know, you're having a bath in a moldy bathroom, then, you're not really solving the problem.
Wow. Yeah. You're just adding on another layer, which I love. The environmental factors out there. But so let's talk about, because this is going to go directly to the next question, which is, what can be some hidden causes of anxiety?
Yeah, I sort of just gave one away.
Yeah, that's why.
And not a lot of people think about this. And for me, this was I have many, many causes for me, but mold is what really tipped the scales. So I lived in this apartment and I couldn't see mold. I mean, it wasn't, you think of people living in mold, you think like, oh, gross mold, like coming up the walls. And like, it's just, no, it wasn't like that. There was like a tiny bit of mold along the ledge of the bathroom. And what had happened is there was water damage behind the wall. So the whole wall was rotted. And so the mold spores were seeping into my apartment. I didn't know this. I thought maybe the apartment was haunted or something, but it sort of was.
It was haunted with mold spores.
Mold. So mold is like, especially when we think about anxiety, again, we're talking pretty intense looping thoughts, like very, almost like painful levels of anxiety. Mold can trigger that. So that's a really big one for a lot of people. Gut health can be a really big one. And this is where we sort of branch into infections. Like, a worm, I had a 6-inch worm living inside of me. Like, obviously that's going to cause my body some stress. There's also very small infections. Like, there's an infection called Clostridia. And this will prevent proper breakdown of dopamine metabolites, which causes a lot of like crazy OCD-like behaviors and anxiety in people. And so it's a good bacteria that overgrows. Like, it's tiny, we don't see it, but yet this can cause like very, very painful in a way symptoms of anxiety. And then, another big one is gluten. So a lot of people I work with I had someone discover she was celiac when we were working together. And, she'd gone into, psychiatry. She'd seen psychiatrists for years, and they had labeled her with all of these things. And we suspect that the whole time it was undiagnosed celiac, creating all of these mental health symptoms. And as soon as she took gluten out and replaced it with healthier foods, her whole body responded like instantly. So that is another really big, hidden root cause. And then copper toxicity. And this is another one that like is not on very many people's radars. And I see the pattern of copper toxicity a lot in hair tests. So copper comes from a couple different ways, but the way that most women get it is from birth control, hormonal birth control. So it creates this environment where we're estrogen dominant. That means our estrogen's higher than our progesterone, which is not supposed to be that way. Whenever that happens, our body starts to store copper. So you can imagine you've been on birth control for 18 years. Your doctor was like, nah, there's not really any side effects to this. So you've had 18 years of estrogen dominance, 18 years of storing copper. So copper gets stored in your brain, gets stored in your liver, and it affects your adrenal glands. It stimulates them. So now we're talking like memory issues, anxiety, and detox issues. Right there, this metal that's good for us gets unbalanced and then causes lots of anxiety. So those are kind of the big ones that nobody really thinks about, right? They think about like, oh, I'm fighting with my husband, or, work's really stressful, but nobody's like, oh, I ate bread today. Maybe that's why.
No, you're so right. And I'm laughing because I say that and people look at me like, what? My sandwich is going to give me anxiety? Yeah, it probably will.
Yeah. And it's a simple, like once you learn how to change those foods out, it's actually like a simple fix. Like sometimes I look at people where I'm like, all you have to do is cut out gluten and your life was calm. Like, you are lucky. Like, it's a straightforward answer. Take that as a gift.
Take it and go. Live your life.
Pretty much.
Yeah, no, like, it's interesting because it's not as simple as that. And like you said, you go through and you run these multiple tests, and then you have to understand how to interpret them, because there might be some hidden things in there, like you said, the pattern of getting copper toxicity, because you need to take a really good history of like, are you on, birth control? And then we'll look at the hair and and you go, this makes perfect sense, and asking where they live, where they work. And this is the thing that, that's why I wanted to ask this question, the hidden cause of anxiety, because if you're already anxious, you don't think and go, you can only, if you're so anxious, you can only think kind of in a tunnel. You want things logical. You want things like that because you already have all this anxiety on you. Yet alone, do you want to think about, has my bathroom got mold? What's my food like? What's that like? So this is where it's so important to work with someone like you, or, to get to the bottom cause and figure out what is going on.
Yeah, you're totally right, because, Googling it is not going to work. And I speak to a lot of women that are like, Google masters, aren't we all, especially when there's health anxiety involved. And the top hits on Google are never really the answers that we want. I mean, I did it. I don't know how many nights I sat there where I was like, cause of stomach issues over and over and over again. Like, I don't know why I thought some magic answer would come, but it doesn't come from that, right? It comes from someone who's been through it and who has a perspective of all of the different things it could be.
Yeah. And those hidden causes are just extraordinary, because not many individuals would think about that. So I guess you kind of already answered this one in regards to how can someone find the root cause of their anxiety, emotional, nutritional, biological causes that may be causing anxiety. I know a few of them may be running tests and things like that. Is there anything else that they can do to find the root cause?
Yeah, running tests is the big one, but then taking a look at your lifestyle. I mean, if you're burning the candle at both ends, or you're eating a standard American diet, or, you know, a diet full of carbs and sugar, and you're not, you know, doing self-care, then you need to look at that. If there's unaddressed trauma, and, you know, I don't necessarily do a lot of trauma work, but it's on my radar for people. I sort of get them ready. Like, how do we get your system primed so that if you want to do that deeper work, it can handle it? But a lot of people don't, oh yeah, like that trauma is old. It's not impacting me. It absolutely is. And so trauma, like just taking a look and being aware of those things can be, you know, a great start. You don't have to run tests to do that. You can just start to take stock on what your life is like and what your thoughts and self-care beliefs are, and go from there.
Yeah. It's kind of like what just came to me when you were saying that. It's kind of like everyone writing a biography on themselves.
Yeah. Because, you know, often we just go, like, how many times do we step back and they're like, you know, take stock on our own lives. We're especially now, we're just such go people. And I know, you know, with the recent world events, that hasn't necessarily been the case for some, but I think in general, it's just busy. We're busy humans. We're very busy. So taking time to be like, oh, like that is, you know, something that's going on. Or, you know, a big one was a lot of people were working from home this last year or two. And so they just thought, oh, I can't be alone. It's because I'm not with people. But they didn't realize they moved home to a moldy house. Or, you know, for one of my clients, she was drinking water with massive amounts of calcium in it. So when she started to work from home, she was now drinking this water source that was building up in her system in like astronomical amounts, right? So it's starting to be critical. Instead of getting out of the blame, it's shifting out of like, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me, like I must just be stuck and helpless, to like, okay, what's the message? What's my body trying to tell me? Now I'm going to be a detective and try and figure it out, and go as far as you can. And then, okay, I'm self-sabotaging, or this isn't working, and then hiring somebody.
Yeah. So I guess individuals that may be listening who have anxiety, they might be like, is there an end? Am I ever going to feel like I don't have anxiety? Am I ever going to feel maybe the way I was 10 years ago, where, you know, things didn't get to me? I wouldn't drop and cry or have a panic attack in the last second. I wouldn't get overwhelmed with all the business tasks. I'll be able to, you know, do my work and be socializing, not just choose one or the other where I can't take on much. Can they get to that end goal?
You can, but I think we're a society that wants a quick fix, right? Like pop a pill and here's your answer. Everything's great in like 24 hours. And, you know, it took your body probably years to get to this situation. So it's probably going to take at least a year, but, you know, sometimes it's a lot faster to really get to the root. So I work with women over about 12 to 16 weeks, and I see massive changes just in a couple of months. You know, women who couldn't drive their kids anywhere because they were too anxious are now driving them everywhere. Or women that are having like very obsessive thoughts, those thoughts are going away, or they're just feeling their whole body come down a notch. Like, it's absolutely possible. You just have to make sure you're targeting and healing the root cause of why. You know, if and this is the example I like to give, if, you know, you have a giant worm, there's that worm again. If you have
it's coming back.
Worm, it does. If you have a giant worm in your stomach and you're meditating, like, that's not really going to solve, like, great, good for you for meditating. That's going to help your nervous system. But until you get that worm out of your system, that's not going to make a difference. Same thing with mold, right? Like, if you're eating super healthy and doing all the things, but you're living in a place infested with mold, like, it's going to feel like nothing's working. But it's because, like, you haven't found the big, I call it the Jenga piece, the piece that's going to topple everything else, right? And it's different for different women. But to answer your question, you can get there. You just need the roadmap on how to do it.
Yeah. I was going to say maybe the little worm will meditate with you. So what role, I know, what I want to talk about a little bit about gut. Let's go gut first. So what role does gut have in anxiety? And I know we could talk about hours and hours and hours about what role it does, but if you can just explain to the audience in regards to the connection.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting connection, actually. So we're going to take somebody who has, not that great of a diet. So they're eating breads and like pastries, but maybe they eat some meats and, or maybe they don't, maybe they're just vegetarian, but they're eating those like fatty, sugary foods, maybe a soda here and there, drinking some alcohol. And then we're going to follow that. So what happens over time, obviously not one meal, is that it's going to wear away at the lining of the gut. So the lining is made up of these microvilli, which are basically like finger-like structures. And I sort of like to think of it like coral, right? So you have beautiful coral. And when we start feeding it like McDonald's, then that coral starts to lose its color and the microvilli start to shrivel, right? So we've now sort of effectively bleached our own coral. And so then we're not going to be absorbing things properly. And then we get something called leaky gut. So that's where the lining of the gut wall, it breaks apart. It's only one cell deep, which still blows my mind. So that one cell sort of like breaks apart and food particles get in. So then we're going to activate the army inside of us, which is our immune system. And the immune system is going to be like, hey, like, what the heck are you doing in here? Like, we don't want you in here. And so it's going to create a cytokine storm and all this inflammation in the body, right? So what a lot of people don't realize, most people now, thankfully, have heard of leaky gut, but they don't realize when you have leaky gut, you also have leaky brain. So this is then the inflammation is going to affect your brain. So there's this blood-brain barrier, which keeps unwanted particles out of the brain and the particles we want in the brain. So when that becomes leaky, you can imagine what happens. Stuff leaks in, the neurotransmitters get confused. It affects like neurotransmitter production and like connection between the synapses, which are the cells in our brain. And so then we start developing symptoms over time again, like anxiety, right? And then when you're anxious and you don't feel good, what do? You either A, don't eat, or B, you grab for those comforting foods, which then sort of like keeps that cycle going, right? So there's a massive, massive connection there that not a lot of people realize.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you explain that. And for those people before that were thinking, how does that sandwich impact my anxiety? You just explained how it impacts their anxiety, which is absolutely brilliant. And a lot of us don't think about how our gut, because we like to see things physically, because our gut's down here and our brain's up here. How are the two connected? Because we're taught to categorize things. That's your head, that's your gut, and they're not connected. But like you said, they completely are.
Yeah. And I mean, we're taught that, but then the medical community also reflects that, right? Like I go to my GI doctor and I remember in my own journey, I went to a skin doctor and I said, like, I had really bad skin issues. And I said, well, I have really bad gut issues. Like, do you think they're connected? And I was so excited. And she's like, I don't know, but here's some doxycycline or whatever medication she prescribed to me. And so, when we go to the conventional medical system to heal, it's piecemeal. So it's sort of not surprising that people are like, well, I go here for my gut and here for my brain. And it's like a big aha when they realize that, you can't feed your gut and expect your brain to be okay.
Yeah. 100%.
Feed your gut crappy food, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're 100% right. 100% right. So now one thing is hormones. How do they affect our anxiety? And I know you mentioned birth control for a little bit before, but what role do actual hormones, especially female hormones, have to play in our anxiety?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because a lot of people think like, oh, I just need to fix my hormones, because you notice, right? Right before you bleed, you're like a crazy person. Or when you ovulate, those are really the two times that I see that the most for people. And so you start to realize that your anxiety follows a cycle. So naturally you're like, I just need to fix my hormones, then I can fix my anxiety. And so hormones actually, they cause a lot of the symptoms of anxiety, but they aren't the root cause. So, and I'm going to give you an example of that. So think about, we're in a starving tribe. We're going back again to the lion days. Okay.
I thought you were going to say worms, but okay, we're going back to the lions.
No, we're done with the worms for now. We're going back to the tribal lion days, right? So our tribe is starving. And so my body has to choose, do we want to, nourish her and nourish her stress response and have her ability to run from a lion, or are we going to, make a baby? And so our bodies are naturally designed to move away from reproductive sex hormones into more of the stress hormones under a state of stress, because we don't actually want to be pregnant starving, or be pregnant running from a lion, or be in a war-torn country trying to nourish a baby when we can't nourish ourselves. Like, that's against how we're designed, right? So the same thing is going to happen when you're chronically stressed. Like, your body's not going to allocate all of that energy towards building this fantastic, robust sex hormones. It's not going to at all. It's going to, go towards a lot of other things, like, producing way too much cortisol for you because you're always stressed. So your body's like, oh, you need more, so cortisol being that stress hormone. So hormones are definitely a part of it, but they're never just the whole picture. So what I tend to see, I'll see estrogen dominance, or the big one with anxiety is often low progesterone. So, and this is where we cross into gut health, right? Because if you're not, absorbing your fats, which are the building blocks for hormones, or eating, healthy food, which are also the building blocks of hormones, and you're not going to get enough hormones, like progesterone. And so then you're going to feel super anxious all the time. But if you just go in and take, bioidentical progesterone, you haven't solved the problem. Yes, you feel better, but the problem is, like, there's something else creating that switch to stress, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. I love that explanation. And it's interesting that you said that that's not the root cause, because a lot of individuals would go, well, I am ovulating, or I'm about to, bleed, therefore my hormones need fixing. But it's kind of like, well, if we go dig deeper, why are your hormones not doing what they're supposed to be? And you said it perfectly. And there's one thing also is, maybe you are not eating enough, full stop. Because so many individuals these days are not eating enough food, and that just causes havoc on your hormones.
Absolutely. And, there's a big trend to keto, right? Or intermittent fasting. And I don't really ever recommend that for my anxious clients, because, you need carbs if you're premenopausal. So if you're still cycling, we need a certain amount of carbs. And so postmenopausal women tend to do really well on, like, the keto diet, or women who are trying to lose and have the weight to lose do really well. But usually what I see is women will do it for a couple of months and they'll feel like a superstar, and then their body crashes, right? Because they're not giving their body the fuel that it needs. As women, men can do it, but as women, it's a lot harder.
I like that you put that in there. We can't, and especially also in the business world, we can't compare ourselves to other people, but in particular men. You can't compare yourself. You got a different outline of body. You've got different hormones. You're wired differently. Things are happening differently. Therefore, you can't compare yourself to anyone. Everyone's wired differently, but yet alone also men in a way like that, if we're looking at the business world, because, things are changing, but they're still run here in Australia, it's still run mainly by men in a way. So I wanted to also find out from you, what could be some signs someone might have hidden causes of anxiety that might be affecting their business performance? What might be some effects that it can have on their everyday life running their own business?
I mean, anxiety in general, right?
Yeah. So anxiety in general. Yeah.
Like right away, it's not like, so stop that connection instantly to, like, it must be in my mind, to, like, oh, there's probably hidden causes. So I almost want to, like, link it right away. Another one is, gut infections. So if your gut is, like, not healthy in any way, you have GERD, acid reflux, bloating, constipation, you're not digesting your food, hidden cause going on, right? If you're starting to have, panic attacks, period, But, for me, I was having them to random things like normal tasks, but it was becoming too much for me. Likely a hidden cause. I was talking to somebody today about, is it busy? Are you more busy than usual? Or does your brain just not have a capacity to handle the busyness? And there's a difference, right? There's a difference between I can handle these 20 tasks, or it does these 20 tasks now. I used to be able to do them, but they stress me out now and I feel like it's 400. That's not you doing too much. It's your body being we can no longer handle any level of stress at all.
Yeah, which is not. I love that question. I love that question. That's such a good question, because a lot of individuals go, well, 2 years ago, I was able to handle running my business, but now I can't. And has your business grown? Not that much. Still the same tasks. So that's such an interesting point.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's because we pushed ourselves too hard. Like everyone knows, running a business is a lot of energy and work. And so that might not have been sustainable. And that's your body's way of saying, slow down. But sometimes it has nothing to do with that. And it's literally just there's other things going on, or you weren't feeding yourself very well during that time. And so you've burnt your body out, and now you can't handle the same amount of stress. So now we want to look internally as well.
Yeah. So if, for example, someone, started their business and like you said, they were thriving on it, and they were just putting so much energy in it for the first 3 years, they're in their 4th year and they've just anxiety galore, everyday anxiety, can't finish the tasks they can do. What effect does that have on their success? What will end up happening the 4th year, the 5th year, the 6th year on their health and their success?
Well, it's not sustainable, right? So if you're already doing that on year 4, you need to look at what you did to get yourself there, right? Or what weren't you doing to get yourself there? Or maybe you were doing all the right things, but you have a worm living in you, or you're living in mold, which is running around. It's sort of I think of it as viruses on a computer, right? You could have all the right programs and, great memory, but if you have something sucking that computer dry, it's not going to work properly. So if you don't figure that out now, then you're doing yourself a disservice, because your growth is going to get stunted, right? Because you're only able to grow as much as you have energy to grow. So if you're already burnt out at year 4, I can imagine where you're going to be in year 7, and it might not even be anywhere. You might have closed up shop because you just literally can't sustain it. And my guess is you went into the business, they went into the business with a lot of passion for what they were doing. And so it's so important not to lose that passion. And in order to do that, you have to make sure that you're healthy.
Yeah.
Right? Fine balance.
That's so true. That's so true. And go back to that thing that you said, looking at the hidden causes. I know your bathroom, you might be like, how's my bathroom connected to my business success? Well, there it is. Because if your bathroom has mold, you ain't going to succeed.
Yeah, no, you're not. Because, mold will cause, extensive cortisol burnout. A lot of people, by the time they discover mold, their cortisol production is dismal, which means your battery every day, instead of charging to 100%, is charging to 30. So you might get to noon and then be like, I'm done, because you don't have that ability to recharge in the same way.
Yeah, that's so true. So how can it affect their day performance? I guess it affects concentration. Anxiety affects your concentration.
Yeah. So day to day, it's going to affect your energy level. I see both ends of the spectrum, right? Where it's you're superhuman in terms of what you can do. And then the other spectrum, which is I'm exhausted. I literally have no energy to do anything, no motivation to do anything. But then you're going to get focused, right? Are you scattered? Can you focus? Can you sit there and do a topic, or are you all over the place doing whatever? And can you actually focus on what you're doing? Or is your brain clear? Brain fog is what a lot of women talk to me about, right? I have brain fog and I just can't be clear. And so now you're taking 2 days to do something that should have taken you 1 day, because you're I just can't you can't do this. Like, I just can't work my way through it. Or you're having to hire assistants or other people to do those things for you. So it's a financial cost, it's a time cost, it's an outcome cost. Like, what's your product going to look like? If you can't really focus on it, like, is it really going to be that great? You know? So, I mean, there's so many layers in which that can affect you.
Yeah, so many layers, how anxiety can affect you. You're so on point, 100%. And I guess the audience listening now is like, well, Jodie, what do I do? Jodie, what are some practical tips for the audience to incorporate to not erase their anxiety out of their life, but just manage it or reduce it so they're able to deal with it?
Okay, so I'll keep my list manageable then. So the first thing I would say is cut out gluten, which, I mean, that can be stressful, but if gluten is a big one for you, it's an easy fix, right? It's cutting out something that's stressing out your body. There's so many gluten-free options now. Like, when I first got into it, there was like nothing on the market. Now it's pretty easy to get stuff. So cut out the gluten would be the first one. The second is set aside some time for you. Every day, time for you. If that's 5 minutes doing, Headspace or Insight Timer, or you're doing a 10-minute bath at the end of the day, but it's like your private space where you're decompressing and you're teaching your body or reminding your body, this is a calm state. Look, we can get here. Because that's going to be really important for your baseline. And calming that nervous system down, right? So that can be another really big one. And then sleep, getting to bed. If you get to bed between the hours of between 10 and 2, that's when your adrenal glands are going to heal. So if you can get to bed by 10, you're going to give your adrenals like that much more time to heal. And so you're going to feel better and feel more rested the next day. And so that can be huge short term, but it can also be huge long term. Because if you're, up at 1 being like, oh my gosh, I just got to do this, and you're not giving the adrenals time to repair, you compound that after months, then, that's going to be another big thing.
Yeah, compounded months, years. And it's interesting because when you talk to most people, they go, I don't get to bed till 2 and that's when I feel like I can sleep. Why 2? Think about it. Like, why is it that you go to sleep at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m.? Because you actually need, like you said, you need those recovery. I love those practical tips. So we've got sleep, we've got time for yourself, and we've got cutting out gluten. And you said time for yourself every day. I think some people are like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. And unfortunately, that's what we've come to. Our society has come to believe us taking care of ourselves every day, we shouldn't have that time.
Put a 5-minute timer on and be like, I have 5 minutes for myself. And if you can't do it, then the question is like, what kind of trauma is preventing me from sitting with myself?
Wow.
And then you need to go do trauma work.
And that's leading us nicely to our next episode that I want to interview for about trauma work. I absolutely love it. Love it. So look, to finish off, I ask all my guests, as this is the Natural Health Podcast, what is your natural health hack that you may do every day, once a week, or something that keeps Jodie at optimal health?
This is an interesting one. Because that's what this is about, is really expanding people's views of what health is. I actually sleep under something called a Faraday cage. So I don't have to do much for this. I just have to go to bed. And this cage is made of protective material that blocks EMFs for me. So EMFs, I'm very sensitive to it. It stresses my body out. We didn't talk a lot about this. But it stresses my body out. And I actually go and sleep under an EMF tent every night so that I know my body is not getting Wi-Fi when I sleep.
That is amazing. That's absolute. And how long have you been on that for?
I just started it. It took me a while to get on board with it. And it makes a big difference, especially if you're super sensitive. Or if you're living in, an apartment or condo building that has lots of different Wi-Fi going on, it'll block that all out so that your body can naturally sleep.
Yeah, especially in apartments and, like you said, in townhouses and things like that, or anywhere where there's civilization.
Yeah.
So instead of you going camping in the bush, you're doing it at home every day.
I am. Yeah. Take my camping home.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Wow, you've just blown our minds about anxiety. Hopefully the audience is able to see anxiety on a different light, in a way that they can see it as, it's made there to protect us. It's made there for us to live optimally. It's not there to, destroy us, but when it becomes imbalanced, it can. And it may not just be because your thoughts are making you anxious. It may be because of your hidden causes, which you went through in amazing detail. And then you wrapped it up in regards to hormones and the gut and so many other things. So really, really do appreciate you being on Natural Health Podcast, Jodie.
It's been a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to share.
Thank you so much. And remember, the missing link between failure and success is your health. The content and information provided here is opinion of Mihaela Raguse and is for information purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. It is not intended to provide medical advice or take the place of medical advice or any current treatment you're undertaking. Consult your own medical professionals for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the Natural Health Podcast. It is advised that you consult your doctor or healthcare professional in relation to any health concerns you may be having. Mihaela Raguse does not take responsibility for any health consequences which occur from a person listening, viewing, or reading this content. And in circumstances shall the Natural Podcast, Mihaela Raguse, any guests or contributors to the Natural Podcast, or any employees, associates, or affiliates of Mihaela Raguse be responsible for damages arising from the information provided on the Natural Podcast. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical conditions in either yourself or others. Please note, if you're taking prescription, do not stop your medication or start a new protocol, including but not limited to supplements, diet, lifestyle changes without consulting a doctor or healthcare professional. If you or any person has a medical concern, you should consult with your healthcare provider or seek other professional medical advice. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something that you have read or heard on the Natural Podcast or in any linked materials. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. Neither Mihaela Raguse nor the publisher of this content takes responsibility for the possible health consequences of any person or persons reading or listening or following the information in the educational content.